And welcome back to Frankly Speaking in conjunction with May He Rain. And joining me on the line tonight is my good friend, Julien DeMarco. How are you, Julien?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. So, Julien, we got Joe Biden's polling numbers dropping to 36% in the Quinnipiac poll, right? We got inflation skyrocketing throughout the country. Gas prices are all-time high out in California. You got really division all over the place. You got a big old trial going on for that young man, Kyle Rittenhouse, that's dividing the country here. What else you got going on? I mean, we got a country in turmoil right now at this point in time, and this looks like a golden opportunity for the conservatives now to take back America, right? I mean, they're leading in the generic polling here by like 8 or 10 points. It looks like 2022 is their year, assuming there's no cheating, that 2022 is going to be their year. You take back the House and the Senate, and then it's only a matter of time till they beat the old, feeble dementia patient in the White House. That's what they're telling me, Julien. Hey, America's on the verge of coming back. Conservatism is going to reign, my friend.
Well, out of all those numbers that you mentioned, the only thing that I think is hold on, let me say this. So out of all those numbers that you mentioned, all of them are accurate except one. And those are the poll numbers about Joe Biden. And what I mean by accurate is that it doesn't really matter how low his polls are. Because, I mean, when Trump was in office, his polls were really low. So that didn't really mean anything. If we're going to, they said that Trump wasn't going to win in 2016. We know that they oversampled Democrats. They do this all the time. It doesn't matter if it's 2016 or if it's 2020 or if it's Bush 1, Bush 2. They always oversample Democrats, leftists, progressives, any of that ilk. Inflation is skyrocketing. The country is polarized over Kyle Rittenhouse. But it's just the name of the game of politics, because we live in a stagnation or apocalypse type of system, in a two-party system. Now, it doesn't even matter if we have 5 parties or 16 parties or 2 parties. In a system where government is public, a republic, in a democracy, there's always a stagnant right now or collapse right now. That is, you either, if you're in a multi-party system, you either have liberals who want to destroy everything now on various degrees, or you have conservatives who want to destroy everything later on various degrees. In a two-party system like ours, we have liberals and leftists who want to destroy everything today, right this very second, and we have conservatives who want to destroy everything tomorrow. So even if they do win in 2022, it doesn't really mean anything, because that's the nature of the game. Even when Trump was in office, after the midterm elections, he lost. The same thing with Obama, the same thing with Bush. So these are patterns. It doesn't really mean anything. This is always what happens in our political system. So for talking heads or anybody to get excited, it's just like, well, this is politics in this country. When you have a Democrat in the White House, they either get like Trump in his first term, where they have, it's almost everybody under Trump. They have control of the Senate, they have control of the Congress, they have control of the majority of the governorships and local whatever. And then midterm, that all just changes, because for whatever reason, the American public thinks that it's great to have, because it's the same people, or it's not like different people coming out of the woodwork, although it sometimes can be, because we all know that election fraud is a real thing for those of us that have eyes to see. But the same people that vote for all these places to have, like Trump, and he has the House and he has the Senate and the majority of governors and the majority of state legislators and all that, 2 years later they vote for the other party. It's just, I don't know. So it doesn't really matter if if the conservatives get whatever they want in the midterms. It's not going to change anything.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I feel. This is a game I've been watching play out for the past, let's call it 20, 25, 30 years of my life, right around there. And nothing essentially ever changes. We've given control and power to Republicans several times under George W. Bush, and then again with Donald Trump. I mean, remember the record-setting elections with Donald Trump, where not only the House, Senate, he swept all the governorships and all the state houses and all the state legislatures. It was a massive victory, record setting, and then what do we get done? Nothing got done. Nothing ever gets done. And the strategy is quite simply this: the Democrats will go scorch earth to get whatever they want, and they will take their losses. And then once they take their losses, the people will get upset because they see things going wrong, like we see now, right? They'll go to the polls, we'll put the Republicans in power, assuming there's no election irregularities, of course. They'll put the Republicans back in power, and then the media goes to work to slander and malign the Republicans. The country gets sick and tired of all the divisions and all the fightings, and they'll put a Democrat back in power so we can all get along again, only to be all angry at each other again. I mean, this is the same cycle over and over. So the Democrats always get what they want. They ram it through, damn the consequences, and the Republicans get in power, and they do absolutely nothing. I mean, not a damn thing that the Republicans ever really get done on a domestic level. And don't tell me about tax cuts. I'm tired of talking about tax cuts, right? Because everybody likes tax cuts. That's a dirty little secret. That's why leftists never send their money in. It's a tactic here, is what this is, Julian. And look, listen. The country is on the precipice of collapse at some point here, right? We're headed in that direction. I'm not saying it's going to happen in 6 months or a year or 5 years, but we're going on the wrong trajectory here, and nothing is changing. It's the same cycle with the same talking points from the media that sets all the talking points that manipulates us into believing there's a chance that we can fix all these problems. But ironically enough, Julian, all the country ever does is go further and further and further to the left, as it has since the founding of the country.
So my thing is, what is conservatives' end game here? Because it doesn't
it's managing the decline, I think, is their end game.
Well, because it doesn't, even if you get Trump in the White House and he gets okay, let's just get this. So Trump gets back in the White House. He gets both houses of, he gets the Congress and the Senate. All 50 states. I'm even talking about California. And you don't get Arnold Schwarzenegger Republican. You get someone even a little bit more conservative, like Ron DeSantis light in California. All 50 states are Republican.
Right.
90% of of the local regional governments are all conservative Republican. What is the plan here if that should ever happen? Because I mean, with the Rittenhouse case right now, you have a legal court system trying to do a runaround the Second Amendment and natural law. Who cares about the Second Amendment is important, but the fact is natural law dictates that we have a right to self-preservation and to protect ourselves. But now they're trying to get around the Second Amendment and natural law by this kangaroo court that's happening with Kyle Rittenhouse, because they can't do away with the Second Amendment. And it's just this country, and I'm listening to people, and it's just like, and we're talking about this Kyle Rittenhouse case, and it's just like, well, this is just why we need to vote people who are for the Second Amendment. Okay, fine. But the fact is that it doesn't matter, because Rittenhouse will either hang for this, or it's the fact that people can't even protect themselves, and they have to go through all these legal hoop jumps to be able to protect themselves, because the Republicans are craven. They're cowards. Yeah. They allow the mob to dictate what is going on. So it doesn't even matter if you have somebody who stands up for the Second Amendment. You're still, when you try and protect yourself with a gun, it doesn't matter if you voted for somebody and that person who's in office is for the Second Amendment. you're still going to be taken away to jail.
Yeah, in other words, they've already won just by getting this thing to court, right? I got a friend of mine out in California. He tells me that, and he's been taught in his gun classes out there, that if you shoot your gun in any capacity, just expect the authorities to show up to your door and take your guns away from you, period. Because there's such a strict definition on when you can discharge your firearm, it's punitive to ever use it. It's almost impossible to ever use your gun, even in an act of self-defense. And this has been the strategy, right? Because this still falls under sort of the umbrella of the Second Amendment. They really haven't taken guns away, but they make it so punitive and so discouraging, Julien, that you're never going to be able to defend yourself. And this is a classic case. Now, we haven't got the result yet of this case, right? If this case comes back to convict this young man, then forget about it. Second Amendment is dead. Take that Constitution, wipe your rear end with it, and throw it in the trash. That's where we're at, Julien.
Yeah, it's just I have. You said that the conservatives are wanting to manage the decline, but that's fine. It's because I'll talk to some people on the ground, and it's just like, well, we just need to elect this and this and this. I'm just like, what do you think this is? 1950?
Yeah.
I mean, just like we are.
Tell me,
we get so many
what is the last,
Julien?
What is the last major piece of domestic legislation, at least on the social front, that the Republicans ever pursued? There isn't one. It's all about economics. It's this quasi-libertarian. Listen. One of the reasons why I left the Republican Party is because, with me and my Catholic roots, the social issues are what matter to me, the moral principles. Because without true and just moral principles, everything else falls apart. The culture, the family, the economics, the politics, everything. When we got to a point about 20 years ago in the Republican Party where they started telling me, oh, we've lost the social war, we've lost the culture, Frank, let's just move on to economics. That's when we lost, Julien. That's when we lost. And my response to that at the time, and it's still my response today, if you have disorder at the cultural level, if you have disorder at a moral level, it's only going to translate into disorder in every fabric, every portion of our society, including politics and the economy. And you wonder why we're here in a nation where, listen, we talk about the will of the people, the right to vote, the right to self-governance, right? It's so important to Americans. And yet, Julia, I'm in middle America. I talk to people every day. Despite their right to vote, their right to self-governance, I've never lived in America at a time and period where people have felt so dispirited, so demoralized, and despite for their right to vote, so feeble in regards to a political system that most people don't even believe their vote counts anymore, Julien.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've never really believed that my vote counts or matters. I've never. There's no way that you can tell me that my vote matters, because it doesn't. The numbers, the culture, the people who get elected, it doesn't pan out. And again, when I talk to some of these people who are conservative, and you're just, oh well, we just need the right vote for people who are for the Second Amendment or who are for against abortion, and I'm just like, I'm thinking to myself, do you think this is the 1950s? Like, honestly, like the culture, you as a conservative have lost the culture. Abortion is, complete and everywhere. It's all in the movie. You have movies about how, with young girls, driving across country to go get an abortion, and somehow that's fulfilling. I mean, you have, the drag queens for Trump, and Lady MAGA, and you have now this trans person who's a commentator and contributor to the Daily Wire. His name is Blair White. It's just like, and the Daily Wire is run by Ben Shapiro, who is a who is a modern Orthodox Jew, and Jeremy Boren, who I believe is of some Christian denomination of sorts.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just like, for those who don't know, modern Orthodox are just, they're Orthodox Jews, so they're very conservative religiously, culturally, morally, and all that other stuff. But it's just like, I mean, I don't understand why somebody like Ben Shapiro is having somebody who he's debated, not just Blair White, he's debated other people who have suffered from this affliction, who go around saying that they're these other genders when they're really not. The only reason why he has and likes Blair White is because he is not like all the other trans people, because he's conservative.
Yeah, Julian, here's the problem. It's like I said earlier, they've caved in the social issues. So now it's the broad tent approach in order to win elections. And so in a democracy, as you know, when you have the broad tent and you have a pluralistic culture and you have to try and draw in really percentages of demographics from different constituencies, it's a matter of you compromise your values to create the biggest tent, to fit as many people in that tent as you can in order to win an election. This is the inherent weakness of democracy, right? So you have to surrender your values at the end of the day. Listen, I've been talking about Ben Shapiro a lot lately, and along with Glenn Beck. These are two gentlemen that believe that, when we talk about liberty, you have to allow the bad liberties to exist in order for us to have the good liberties. So when the bad guys come into power, they don't take away our good liberties. Two issues. One, I don't think good and evil can coexist in society. And number two, just because you allow the bad liberties to exist doesn't mean that when the enemy is in power, they won't take away your good liberties either. And all you've done is compromise your principles. You've allowed evil to infest in your culture and in your country and your civilization, and now you have no means to control it. Listen, we're here for a reason. I keep saying this. The world has gone mad under classical liberal governance. The very same people like Beck and Shapiro and all the other conservatives, all these principles of post-Enlightenment society, of liberalism, this is their world they created. I'm sorry. They need to answer for this at some point, Julian.
Indeed. How about you? Because I'll talk to some people and they'll say, well, Ben Shapiro isn't a classical liberal. And I'll say, well, yes, he is. Well, Ben Shapiro is a conservative. And I'll say, well, he's a classical liberal. That's what a conservative is. Well, when I think of classical liberals, I think of Democrats. So why don't you explain for our audience why Ben Shapiro is a classical liberal, even though he's a conservative?
Yeah, because they trace their origins of philosophical belief back to the classical liberal Enlightenment thinkers, back to the founding fathers. This is where, again, the conservative movement, whether you go back to, Edmund Burke or who's the other one, John Locke, whatever you have it. I know there's some nuances in there. But this is post-Enlightenment ideology, right? It's presenting the world with a secular system of governments. You remove the church. You remove any definitive principles of religion for abstract religious principles is what you do. I mean, these are all classical liberals in one degree or another. What is conservatism? I don't know. Conservatives just 20 years ago, 30 years ago, were fighting in the culture, where they were trying to fight in the culture. Now they've surrendered. It's an ever-devolving kind of ideology. Why? Because they keep losing. The country keeps going further and further to the left. And in order to maintain some control, like I said, managing the decline, you have to win elections. That's how this works. And through the electoral process, everybody has to water down any true principles. This is really the disaster of post-Enlightenment philosophical principles here. And I'm not buying the Catholic Republic thing, the crypto-Catholic thing. I'm not buying it, okay? But this is post-Enlightenment civilization liberalism that is devolving before our very eyes. See, this is why I say, listen, you go back to the Enlightenment, they blame everything on the Catholics in the old world. Granted, 1,400 years of building up civilization, taking a barbarian continent like Europe and civilizing it, making it the greatest civilization in the history of the world. That we have to malign. But now that we're devolving back into paganism in America and in the West, somehow the classical liberals who gave us this brave new world don't want to take the blame for that, and they want to pass it off to the progressive siblings, Julian. Hey, no big secret here. At some point, liberalism, progressivism, they're the same animal, and they meet in the middle at some point. That's what we're seeing, Julian.
Well, yeah, as I've said to this many times to people, conservatives and liberals are one coin, two different sides. And if you don't think that's true, then I mean, I don't know what world you're living in. You're living in some type of fantasy world. You're not living in reality. You're not seeing what's actually going on. I'm sorry if that's harsh, but it's true. Your brain is stunted in some way if you can't see this. But it's just conservatives saying, give me money for, because abortion is bad, but yet abortion is still going on.
Yeah, it's surrender, Julian.
The liberals say that, abortion is just what conservatives do to get their base out. Liberals aren't wrong, because that's exactly true. You scream abortion, murder, they're killing babies. The conservatives come running to the polls. They vote, they get in office, they don't do anything. Babies still dying. And then, they get out of office. Oh, it's horrible. The babies are dying. Get me in power. I'll stop the babies dying.
But Julian, Republicans and conservatives have been able to win at the local level, at the red state level, and they've been able to limit abortion in those states.
Oh, okay. So I guess, we're not going for an all or nothing here, because I guess, a few babies not dying is okay. Yeah. But yet those other ones that are unfortunate to make it, we'll just pray for them. Is that it? Is that what we're going with here?
Yeah, well, basically all the babies in the red states get to survive. Well, not even all of them, but a lot of them, because they haven't completely banned it either. But they've limited it, and I'll give them some credit there. But essentially, a good portion of the babies in the red states get saved, and all of them in the blue states get slaughtered without any support. And then we call ourselves Americans, and then we sing the "God Bless America" song all together, right?
I guess so. I mean, yippee yay for those red states like Texas, but the other states next to it just murdering babies. But yeah, I mean, it's just like and it's not like remember I mentioned this. There are films about how inspiring it is to journey across country to go and get an abortion. And this isn't just Hollywood. This is real life. People do go, they live in parts of the country where it is almost where they're at in their pregnancy, they cannot get a legal abortion. So they drive to the next state or a couple states over and they get it there. So it doesn't really matter. So this does not do anything. Texas, doesn't really, it helps, but it doesn't, because if people really want to get an abortion, they will drive. They will leave Texas and go to the other state that they can get an abortion. Yeah. So it doesn't really. So again, we're right back to where I said, Republicans just use abortion as a way to get the base riled up, and they don't do anything. They have a couple wins here on the local level, and a few babies get saved. But seriously, that's where we're at right now. A few babies get saved, and we're going to give ourselves a pat on the back and sleep at night, okay?
Yeah, it's truly frustrating.
If you're okay with that, then I mean...
Yeah, but nobody's willing to waste political capital, because the moment you start, as conservatives and Republicans start to push to ban Roe v. Wade and all this other stuff, then here come all the leftist groups out to protest and march against you, and nobody wants that kind of publicity right now, right? Is there a willingness to go all in on abortion? Are Americans in the midst of their high deficit sort of spending spree and economics, are they willing to sacrifice their comforts and their pleasures and their porn and their pot in order to stop the baby killings? I don't think so. And I think in many respects, what Republicans are doing, they're reacting to the public at large. They say, okay, it's wrong, it sucks, we'll use it to win elections, but at the end of the day, there's no political will, because people are just too caught up in their pleasures, Julian.
I mean, I don't think conservatives realize how left this country really is. Whether it's the whether it's the talking heads or the people that are constantly sitting watching Fox News.
Okay, so wait a minute. Let's talk about that for a second, okay? Because that's important. Because for years, when I was in the classical liberal camp, I listened to Limbaugh for 15 years. The argument and the belief on the political right is that the majority of this country is actually conservative. It's a silent majority. They live out in the Midwest. They live in pockets. Nobody talks to them, right? And it's a majority conservative country. It's just that Democrats manipulate. They buy out the vote. They go into inner cities and they manipulate their way there. Unionization, government jobs. They're sort of these fraction of coalitions that they bring together. But most Americans are inherently conservative, Julian. Now, the question is, how do we define what conservative is? See, that's the big question here. Because, I haven't. Let's put it this way. You brought up the disordered lifestyle, right? You brought that up. Mm-hmm. There's no majority polls anymore that's against that anymore, Julie. That's all collapsed. Now, thanks to the media and Hollywood, things like that, I'm not sure there's even a majority against all-out ban on abortion. There may be a majority on infanticide, right? But I'm not sure there's even a majority of this country that believes in a flat-out, altogether ban on abortion. You go down the other moral issues, whether it's smoking pot or contraception, whatever you have it. I'm not sure there's a moral majority there anymore, first of all, because we have a broken culture now at this point, right? The family's been decimated, right? We don't have we have the millennial generation is the first uncatechized generation without any religious formation at this point in time, right? There's no religious fervor left other than a few Catholic trads and a few evangelicals really at this point in history. I mean, there just isn't a desire. And this is why the Republicans are arguing we have to be these quasi-libertarians. Let's just focus on economics, Julian.
Well, if they're the majority, if they're the silent majority, then why aren't they running things? I thought, from what I understand about how democracy is supposed to work, the majority rules. So why is it that a small, screeching, harpy-like minority is controlling everything? If you're the silent majority, why aren't you in office? Why aren't you, controlling everything when it comes to the voting block?
Well, they would tell you New York and California are massive states, and there's lots of manipulations, political manipulation in that state. A lot of people don't tell you they don't even trust the political system. So the political system itself has been corrupted in blue states. That's one of the arguments.
Well, I mean, even still, if it's 3-1 conservative, whatever conservative means, even in those blue states, then there should be, conservatives running for office, like it's going out of style, and they should be able to control the polls, regardless of the manipulation, because the minority they don't have the numbers, and everybody knows they don't have the numbers. If you know they don't have the numbers, and so when they say that the election is stolen in California, and you're supposedly the majority, you basically are aiding and abetting. Being quiet is complicity.
Well, I think they would say that's states' rights. It's California is not a majority conservative state. That's liberal because a lot of the conservatives have left. When they say majority, they mean middle America, Julian. See, California is a lost cause.
I was just using California as an example, but this could be used anywhere else too. But California is a lost cause.
Yeah, and so that's where we get into it, and so it's difficult. I just think what conservatism actually means. I think if conservatism means that we all want freedom in the areas of economics and less taxation and less regulation, I think there's a good chunk of the country that wants that. But for me, conservatism means the moral compass, right? Because if you don't establish this moral compass, everything is consumed by it. I mean, there's lots of talk of secession from the right, whatever that means, right? But I keep going back to what I keep saying. Okay, fine. Let's assume you have this amicable divorce. Me and you talked about this before. What's going to
Yeah.
stop the moral corruption at the state level, right? Because everything is deteriorating at this point. It's a moral collapse. And because, listen, because California is Looney Tune and gone, it doesn't mean it's not spreading. I'm in Utah. This is one of the most conservative states that there is. We're seeing a breaking point here. The Mormon church is losing its influence out here. You got liberal entities entering here. I mean, we see this all over the world. It's only a matter of time until all the states capitulate to this thing. We've just seen the easier states, I guess you could say, those that have the majority, I guess, control of power with the Democratic Party already consumed. But these states in the Midwest, they're being attacked. Listen, the Democrats targeted the state of Colorado about 20 years ago. That was a hardcore conservative state. It's gone. They shipped in a bunch of immigrants in there. They shipped in a bunch of money and political allies. They've taken that state over. If Colorado can be taken over, then the rest of the Midwest is prime for taking, Julian.
Indeed. I mean, someone always tells me, oh, well, Texas is the only state that has it in its constitution that it's legally allowed to secede from the Union. Okay, fine. Do you honestly think that this iteration of the United States government is going to honor that? No. Yeah. No way in hell are they going to honor that legality. So when all these people who are talking about amicable divorces, and even if Texas was to invoke that would never, the United States federal government would never allow that to happen. Number one. So because one thing I think conservatives don't seem to understand is that the left and the liberals do not care about the law. And this is something that I'm trying to get people to understand that I seem to be failing at. But liberals and left do not care about the law. So you can screech and holler and say that the law is on my side. They don't care. They have the power of the government, and theoretically they have a gun, and they will tell you what to do. And if you don't do it, they will shoot you, sometimes literally. So
yeah, it's just, I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult. I think it's frustrating because from my perspective, listen, the country is what the country is, right? In regards to its founding principles. And I'm more than willing to work within the parameters of the system, even though I know it's terribly, terribly flawed. And this is where my frustration kicks in, because I think for the right that turns everything into economics, essentially utilitarianism, and they never take true principles of morality seriously, right? Particularly with the concept of religious liberty, which I call American, personal moral codes. Unless we get these moral principles straight and we start to deal with some of the disorders in society, some of the disorders in culture, and start to repair the family, this country is only going to continue to go to the far left. Now, how do we fix a family in a pluralistic society where there's no overriding principles of eternal truth, where the Constitution itself basically says you pick and choose your own personal moral codes? I don't know, other than evangelizing it. And we know we have problems in the church, and Protestantism is a clusterfuck of contradictions. We know that, Julian. And so how do we work this thing out in the end? I don't know. Am I willing to work with conservatives myself to help manage the decline? Yeah, because I got to live this life. I got children to raise. But my big thing has been, Julian, as we close this podcast out, can we have an honest conversation about everything wrong with the country? And can we not presume that at the origins of the country, there was some divine sort of intervention of how the country was established? Can we talk about the flaws of the country while we work to try and manage what we have? Because this is the problem with the right. This is the problem. They've created a religion out of their classical liberal ideology. And I'm convinced that this classical liberal ideology was sort of formulated to replace Christendom and the Catholic faith. You know, it goes back to the shining city on a hill and manifest destiny. It's an alternative religion that is now collapsing, an alternative pagan religion, right? With this abstract Jesus Christ, this personal Jesus of the Protestants, right? Which is collapsing. And the contradictions of Protestantism are just, it's a joke at this point. I'm willing to work with conservatives, but we have to have an honest dialogue. And that's where we lose conservatives. They don't want to have that honest dialogue about what the country is, was, and where it's going.
Well, yeah, I mean, the most powerful thing and the bravest thing we can do now is to look the truth in the face.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to look the truth in the face, then, I mean, you're going to live in a fantasy world, and you're not going to see what this country really is. You're going to see what you have it made in your mind. I, for one, am wanting to look at what this country is, not what the history books have,
or the utopian fantasy that some people have set up, right?
Yeah, the utopian fantasy, because because this country is not was never Catholic, and because it has this mixed bag of Protestantism, it had to have, and because of this, how this country was created, it has to have, every country needs a myth, a founding myth, and it needs to be sacred.
Yeah. The
thing is, though, we are so close to that sacred founding of this country. If, it might be different if, we were, say, 1,000 years removed, but we're only about 300 years removed from the founding of this country. So we are literally at the beginning of the myth of this country. Yeah. And so it is more poignant. It's more in your face than, say, if we were 1,000 years removed. And so it's very hard to get over that. It's very hard to get that out of people's minds.
Yeah. But see, some conservatives will tell you that's the problem. We're still a young country, per se. Even when me and you over at the Knights of Christendom interviewed Charles Colomb a few months back, he even said, we're a very young country, right? We got to work through these things and kind of create a history of things like that. But there was a little of a caveat Mr. Colomb threw in there, and that is, for example, I'm wearing my Sicily hat here, and Sicily being in many respects a very pluralistic country like America was, but it had the Catholic faith that consolidated the culture and gave us true principles of religion, gave us the graces of the church and the sacraments and only the eternal truth of God. See, Sicilians had something to consolidate. Now, the apostasy kicked in over there too, don't get me wrong, they're having their problems, but see, America never had that. It was never based on eternal truth. It was based upon the principles of trying to manage man's fallen nature and try to overcome the suffering that man has gone through a lifetime. And it's led to the denial of true faith, true religion. That's the problem at the core. America, I've always said it, I think there's a lot of good people that live in America, lots of good and decent people that work hard, want to do what's right, and we're mixed in with a bunch of people now that are completely disordered in every capacity. But again, America, it needs to find its faith. I keep saying that. There's no fixing this without the Catholic Church. Now, I don't want to get into the crisis of the church, because that's where the classical liberals are going to fire back here at us and say, well, look at your leftist pope. That's fine. I just like to remind everybody that because we have a papacy that's somewhat controversial, we've had that in the past, right? We've had it in the past, and the church has survived it. What you have to remember is that the keys that Jesus gave to Peter, it said that the gates of hell will not prevail. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be a fight. It actually presumes there would be a fight for the soul of the church. All right? The institution of the papacy has survived for 2,000 years. It dates back to Christ the King. It will survive every nation on the face of this planet, every company, every corporation, okay, every political ideology. It's not going anywhere, and God will restore it. That is the faith we have, not because it's a great institution or because we have these great leaders. Quite the opposite. We have some very weak leaders, but precisely because the church is safeguarded by the Holy Spirit and Christ our King, Julien, that's what we have to reestablish. And even in the midst of a bad papacy, it is not time to lose faith, Julien.
You know, this is where a Baptist preacher would say something of the likes of, "Can I get an amen?" I just wanted to say that. But yeah, can I get an amen? I mean, that's true. We just have to evangelize. I've said this before, and I'll say this again. You know, evangelization is key, and we have to get out of this, you know, Freemasonic mindset, because, you know, Charles Clome has said this before. You know, why evangelize? You know, he was asked the question, like, why has, you know, I'm trying to think. It was, so he was asked why, like, Freemasonic lodges, their memberships are declining, and he said, well, because they've won. You know, we live in a complete Freemasonic society, so you know, we are all Freemasons. You know, even if we're not card-carrying members, and so you know, and then so if you know why evangelize your neighbor when you can just live with him and tolerate him? You know, if we actually want to see change, authentic change, and true authentic Catholic politicians be in office, then we need to evangelize not only ourselves but other people. Because I mean, there isn't, you know, we keep seeing all these like evangelization things, but yet I don't see the country being evangelized. And you know, so it's just like we have to authentically be Catholic and truly be Orthodox and truly believe it, and rid ourselves of the Freemasonic liberalism of the last 300, 400 years. And realize that they are not compatible with the Catholic faith.
Yeah. I think I was watching Mr. Cologne video talk about, I forgot what it was. I think it was Americanism. And he talked about how if you look at Washington, D.C., the structures of the building, the architecture is all enshrined in Masonic ideology. It's there at the founding. And he's right in the sense that membership may be dropping, but we've all embraced Masonic principles, right? Because they've won. They've won. I've been criticized by some of my viewers here at Frankly Speaking for mentioning the fact that I've bought and sold houses, right, in this current housing market. I've been accused by traditional Catholics of partaking of the usury system. Well, here's the irony of it all. And maybe somebody can show me something different. I don't know how to raise a family or survive in society without partaking in that usury system at this point in history, because it is an economic system based on usury principles. And see, that's why I say they've won, because we can't even opt out at this point anymore. Unless you're asking me to go out and live on public grounds in a cardboard box, all right, as a transient, I don't know how to escape that usury system, because the Masons have won. We're all caught up in this system at this point in history, right? And this also leads to a lot of questions: the economy, the usury system, the slave wage system, how the average everyday man has lost the means of production in regards to the land. There's no more freedom. People work now from death to birth. Look at the average age of Social Security recipients. That's based on age of death now, right? You're working a lifetime to manage a debt load, Julien, that you're born into, right? And it's a matter of continually working and really having essentially very little left. Yes, there is a fluid class system in America. You can move up that fluid class system if you want. But see, the problem with that is that Americans don't always play with the same moral principles. And that's why I've argued, right? There's a problem when you don't have a unified moral standard, and then tell people, you got to go out there, work hard. You got to go out there, work yourself up by your bootstraps, pull yourself up. That's what we do in America. Okay. But if you have different moral standards for everybody, right? And some men use vice to work their way up to the top. And vice in this economic system, it helps. It helps you get to the top. What do you do about the moral man who's not willing to capitulate and is effectively shoved down to the bottom of that class system? Nobody wants to talk about that in America, right? Because again, we're getting into the area of religious liberty, right? We can't tell anybody, how to live their lives. Freedom, liberty, liberty, liberty. See, we're full of contradictions in this culture. And this is why we've reached ahead, Julie. I keep saying there's a reason why the country and why people are so dispirited. They look at this nation, it's all collapsing, it's all corrupt, it's all immoral. There's a reason why we're here, but nobody wants to acknowledge the reason why we're here, Julian, and how we got here.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there is a commission on religious liberty or religious freedom or something in the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and there's a commission, I think, even in the Vatican on religious liberty. It's just like, I thought the Catholic Church was the one holy Catholic Church, and it was the only way to salvation. Why, and you talk to a lot of Catholics, and they'll be all for this religious liberty stuff. This is what I am talking about. We have all imbibed the Freemasonic ideals.
Yeah. Well, I think, Julian, if what the bishops are saying, and I have not read the document, I have to read it. If what they're referring to, that we all have a right to religious conscience, I would agree with that. Right. But that is separate from sort of the universal truths of our faith, where Christ came down and established the one holy Roman Catholic Church, right? There's one church. God is not a polygamist of sorts, where he simply accepts individual covenants of every individual that chooses to honor God in the way they choose, right? And that's what Americans do. There's one revealed truth through sacred tradition, a 2,000-year analogy of the faith that can be traced all the way back before the inception of America. That's where we find ultimately the religious principles that we need here. If religious liberty means you get to pick and choose whatever you want, that's false. If it's a right to religious conscience, Julie, if I or you want to believe in heresy, we have a right to do that. But what we don't have a right to do is proclaim it truth, Julian.
Yeah, I would say that is accurate. But this pluralism cannot last very long.
It's collapsing as we speak.
It is destroying itself. Diversity. What's that one saying? Diversity is our strength. There we go. Diversity is not our strength, because look at this country. Look at how you keep pushing all this diversity, and it's become more fractured as time goes on.
Look at all of the West. It's not just America. It's all of the West at this point. That's right. The thing about it. People think I'm picking on America. I'm not picking on America. I love this country. Okay, I love this guy. This is where I was born. This is where I was raised. I'm going to raise a family. I'm going to die in this country. I have everything at stake in this country. That's why I do this show, Julian, because I want to get these things straightened out. But when we criticize America, it's because I intricately know America. I live in this country. But if we're being honest, it's all of the West. It is the same classical liberal Enlightenment principles that have brought the West to its knees and on the verge of collapse. That is the idea I'm trying to convey to people, but nobody cares because we like our pot, we like our porn, we like our comforts, and nobody wants to make a sacrifice for Christ, just as he did on the crucifix, Julian. Your final thoughts, my friend.
My final thoughts is, as I stated earlier, the bravest and strongest thing we can do now is look the truth in the face. That is what we can do. And it will be, and if we do that, we will be on the right path to being able to actually do something. Not band-aid, the fantasies, oh, my fantasy's cracking over here. Let me put a band-aid over it. No, if we remove and destroy the fantasy and look at the reality, we'll be able to actually fix everything. Because putting a band-aid on the fantasy isn't fixing anything. And that's what I think the majority of people, especially since we're talking about conservatives and Republicans, that's what they're doing.
Yep.
They're trying to put a band-aid on the fantasy, but not actually look at the reality.
Yep.
That's my final thought.
Very well said, my friend. I know I've had some Catholic friends of mine who don't see it our way, have their questions about Christendom, and they keep telling me, well, Frank, get over it. America will never be Catholic. And of course, my response is, oh, ye of little faith, because I would never doubt the power of the Holy Spirit. I would never doubt the power of Christ the King and the Father in heaven. And so in that respect, what I would say is you're right. I think we have to look at truth in the face. This thing is collapsing. There's no political solution to this at this point in time. Not that politics doesn't play a practical role, but this thing is collapsing because it has all been preceded by a moral collapse. We have to understand that, right? Go back 50, 60, 70 years, we begin to see, again, the loosening of moral standards. And with that, the political correction system becomes just as corrupt as the culture has become. And now we're really on the last legs of an economy that's being propped up by record amounts of spending money. I think I saw a report the other day. I don't know. I haven't confirmed it, but something like 40% of all the government debt has been printed in the past year and a half. That is remarkable. How is that even sustainable? I don't even know. And that's why I say, I think we're all Julian, we all have comforts. We got our nice little goodies from China that keep our minds occupied, right? We got our comforts, we got our pleasures. It's the only reason why I think more Americans haven't really revolted or taken to the streets. And not that we promote anything like that here, frankly speaking, or may he reign. We're men of the rosary. We pick up the rosary, we go to the Holy Mother, though we do speak our voice. We do give our opinions, and we tell people right from wrong and where we have gone wrong in this country. Like I said, Julian, I love America. I'm invested in it. I have everything at stake here. Right? I may disagree with my classical liberal friends, but I will say this: I am aligned with you if you're willing to listen and have an honest dialogue. And most classical liberals don't want to do that because they're caught up in their utopian fantasy of classical liberal sort of, dreams, I guess you could say. I mean, the fact is that many of us Catholics have called this coming down the pipe for decades, if not centuries. You guys have not heeded our warnings. And now you guys are the ones telling me how the whole thing is collapsing. Oh, the irony. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Julian, my friend, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, this is Frank signing off for Frankly Speaking, and may he reigns. Catch us next time. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.